Tonight, America confronts the tragic cost of deep depression. 5 children dead, a mother's confession, a father's pain.
Is anyone hurt? And she said yes. And I said who? And she said the children.
Disturbing questions tonight about an American tragedy. Terrorism, the attack on U.S. servicemen in Saudi Arabia. Who did it and why? Tonight, the first indictments are out. In depth, picture this. Not just for Superman anymore. Now they can look into your home, even do a body search without you knowing it. But do they have that right? And Gator Raid. An alligator hunter called to the most unlikely of places, would you believe, the heart of New York City.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. A Houston, Texas family tonight is the family next door. One family's tragedy has stunned the nation and raised so many questions about depression, the signs, treatment, and consequences. A young mother who is in jail after her 5 children were drowned in their home was suffering from postpartum depression and under treatment. Her husband, in an emotional and riveting appearance, tried to explain what she had been going through. This is at once an instructive and painful episode for everyone. We begin tonight with NBC's Frederica Whitfield in Houston. Frederica?
Tom, what everyone wants to know is what could have pushed Andrea Yates so completely over the edge that she suspected of killing her own children. Today, outside this suburban Houston home,
my heart just hurts.
Tears, flowers, and stuffed animals for the children allegedly drowned yesterday by 36-year-old Andrea Yates, appearing in court early this morning.
You're charged with capital murder.
And for the children's grieving father, Russell Yates,
I'm sure he's going through a lot. Want to know everybody cares.
An outpouring of sympathy.
And I don't see how anybody in their right mind would have done this, so she wasn't in her right mind.
Today, teary-eyed, the children's father described his wife as recently withdrawn, sometimes robotic. He says his wife, who homeschooled their children, first showed signs of depression, even attempted suicide by overdosing 2 years ago after the birth of their 4th child. Then, he says, it seemed to go away. But with the birth of her 5th child and the death of her father, all within the past 6 months, Russell Yates says she fell victim again. Russell Yates says his wife has taken several different types of medication over the past 2 years, and as recently as last Monday, a change in her medication. Clutching a family photo, Russell Yates came to the home for the first time since the tragedy. He spoke openly about his family, their lives, and how he came to find out about what he called his wife's, quote, incomprehensible act, in his own words.
And she said, you know, like, you need to come home. I said, is anyone hurt? And she said yes. And I said who? And she said the children. And she said all of them. And my heart just sunk. You know, I'm primarily concerned with, you know, right now just tending to my kids and, you know, making sure they get a good burial, you know, are treated good. And my wife, I'm supportive of her. You know, I'm torn. One side of me, you know, blames her because she did it, you know, but the other side of me says, well, she didn't, because that wasn't her, you know, she wasn't in her right frame of mind. And the first time she went through the depression, it took several months for her to really become very seriously depressed. This time it was 3 weeks. It was very fast. Everyone that knows her knows she loves the kids and that she's a kind, gentle person. And what you see here and what you saw yesterday, you know, that's not her. For Valentine's Day, she made these little hearts, and they're like little booklets, and they're like little coupons, you know, for like one was good for a hug, or one was good for a game of your choice, or that sort of thing. And you know, she gave that to all the kids, and you know, she just came up with that on her own. You know, she loved those kids. You know, we did things any other family did. You know, I mean, played t-ball. You know, I coached a t-ball team with my oldest 2 kids. They played, and we used to go out here and shoot basketball with my oldest son. I was glad too yesterday. You know, I was thinking he won the last game of horse we played, so I was I was happy about that for him because he was real competitive. every time I see this stuff, I cry. You know, it's you know, very personal. I'm gonna save a little bit for each child and give the rest away. I you know, hugged and kissed everybody goodbye before I went to work that day, and that's how I want to remember.
Andrea Yates is scheduled to be arraigned tomorrow. This is a case that could have her facing the death penalty, Tom.
Frederica Whitfield in Houston tonight. Thanks very much. Russell Yates' description of his wife's state of mind and struggle with postpartum depression raises so many questions, and we've asked NBC's Kelly O'Donnell to look into many of them.
A woman her loved ones don't recognize. That describes the mother in Houston and, to some degree, millions of other women in the grip of an often misunderstood, often undertreated condition, postpartum depression.
I was crippled with anxiety. I felt very sad. I was weepy. I was crying a lot.
Recovered now, 32-year-old Corey Beer says her postpartum depression came out of nowhere shortly after giving birth to daughter Avery almost 4 years ago. A medical condition beyond the very common baby blues, the sadness and fatigue that more than half new moms experience. Postpartum depression goes deeper for 10 to 15% of mothers.
We do know hormonally that the drop in hormones after childbirth can send some women into sort of a hormonal crisis.
In its extreme form, just one case in 1,000, postpartum psychosis, where women can act out violently, harming themselves or their children. Treatment usually requiring hospitalization.
One of their greatest fears is that they are psychotic. What I hear most often is, I'm going crazy. I'm losing my mind.
Adding to the anxiety, experts don't know the exact cause and believe factors beyond hormones play a major role as well. Family history of depression, stress, even sleep deprivation, poor diet, and a lack of good support systems, family and friends. Postpartum depression is treatable, usually with antidepressant medications and talk therapy. Because cases as extreme as Andrea Yates are so rare, her husband describing a whole host of medications. More questions tonight. Could the Houston tragedy involve a condition beyond postpartum?
Depressed patients are not likely to commit acts of violence towards others, towards their children. Typically, most commonly, depressed patients commit acts of violence towards themselves.
44 million Americans, men and women, suffer with mental illnesses, at times difficult to diagnose, complicated to treat. Tonight, healthcare professionals hope the tragedy in Houston will do more than expose one family's pain, renewing efforts to find more answers and more help. Kelly O'Donnell, NBC News, New York.
At the same time tonight, there is a major new development in one of the worst terrorist attacks ever on Americans. 5 years after a truck bomb killed 19 U.S. servicemen in Saudi Arabia, a grand jury is charging 14 Middle Eastern terrorists with the bombing. However, as NBC's Pete Williams reports tonight, the real masterminds behind this crime may never be brought to justice.
While Iranian officials aren't actually charged, today's indictment is the clearest statement yet. They were behind the attack. A federal grand jury today charges 13 Saudis with the bombing, along with a 14th from Lebanon yet to be identified. All members, today's indictment says, of the terrorist group Hezbollah, dedicated to forcing Americans out of Saudi Arabia and taking its orders from Iran.
The indictment explains that elements of the Iranian government inspired, supported, and supervised members of Saudi Hezbollah.
Today's charges say anti-Western Hezbollah members were recruited while on religious pilgrimages to this shrine in Syria, then trained and indoctrinated in Lebanon and Iran. And from Iran, the indictment says, the bombers got help selecting the target and planning and building the deadly bomb. Packed into a tanker truck like this one and driven up to the Khobar Towers barracks in June 1996. One of the leaders of the bombing group, the FBI says, got a phone call from a high Iranian government official inquiring about their progress. And another of those charged today, Hani al-Sayegh, said to have an unusually close association with the Iranian military. Even so, no Iranians are named in today's indictments because officials say they don't have the necessary evidence. And experts on the Middle East say Iran tries to hide its tracks.
These groups don't necessarily act on behest of Iran, but nevertheless they are trained by Iran, made more deadly by Iran, and work in cooperation with Iran.
Today's charges are a personal victory for outgoing FBI Director Louis Freeh, who pushed hard to get access to the evidence from a once reluctant Saudi government. About half of those indicted today are already in custody in the Middle East. As for any future charges involving Iran, the FBI says this investigation goes on. Pete Williams, NBC News, Washington.
And there's a threat tonight from President Bush about a hot-button issue with the American public, health care and their rights when it comes to HMOs. The president said today that he would veto a proposal giving the patients new rights unless there are big changes in the bill. NBC's Lisa Myers has more from Capitol Hill.
Today, as the president tries to improve his image on the environment, he wades deeper into another politically risky issue, the Patients' Bill of Rights pushed by Senate Democrats.
The president will veto the bill unless significant changes are made to address his major concerns.
Politically risky because a poll today shows 77% of voters support patients being able to sue their HMOs. The issue is especially important among moderates and independents. Risky also because this puts the president on the same side as HMOs, one of the public's favorite boogeymen.
If Bush is seen as a president who cares more about helping big business than struggling middle-income people, it could be very difficult for him.
A new report finds that the compensation of top HMO executives averaged almost $12 million last year. At the same time, families struggled with an average hike in premiums of 8.3%. And if that's not enough, today a new ad, another HMO horror story about a child who couldn't eat or breathe on his own.
The insurance company told us to give Ian up for adoption and let the taxpayers step in and pay for his care.
The president says he favors giving patients new rights, but warns the Democrats will create costly lawsuits, causing families to lose their insurance.
The Kennedy-McCain bill will flatline that coverage for more than 1 million of them.
The White House is desperately searching for a compromise, but the politics are tricky. Some Republicans would prefer no bill at all, and some Democrats would love to box in the president by sending him the very bill he's threatened to veto. Lisa Myers, NBC News, Washington.
Up next, NBC News in depth tonight, sophisticated new technology letting police say concealed weapons or drugs, but is it simply too intrusive?
Do we want the government to have devices that can peer underneath our clothing and tell what we're carrying?
High-tech law enforcement versus the right to individual privacy. Where should we be drawing the line? That's in depth tonight. And later, just when you thought they couldn't get any bigger, the mother of all jumbo jets, does the world need a flying cruise ship? But first, the NBC Nightly News question. How many passengers can the largest plane currently in service carry? We'll have the answer a bit later. NBC News in depth tonight. When does high technology go too far? When do the marvels of technology clash with our constitutional rights of privacy? We're so frequently scanned, taped, and tracked, we may have gotten used to it. But now, the next step may be a step way too far. In depth tonight, here's NBC's Jim Avila.
High-intensity light, penetrating walls, nowhere to hide for border-running stowaways, drug smugglers exposed by X-rays that undress suspects without a touch, and a flashlight that can see movement through walls, X-ray vision that would make Superman proud, but leaves civil libertarians worried about America's shrinking right to privacy.
I always feel that I'm being spied on now.
That's because drug agents parked across the street used heat-sensing equipment to see through the walls of Danny Kylo's Oregon house and monitor heat coming off his indoor marijuana patch. The Supreme Court threw out the case against him, calling the thermal imaging used an illegal search.
That can see people having sex and just being intimate, you know, in your own house, which should be private.
In fact, the newer equipment is even more sophisticated. It can see in the dark. Police can watch suspects through a window by pointing an infrared light in their direction, invisible to the human eye. It eliminates the cover of darkness. Effective gee-whiz crime fighting. This truck-mounted camera can see drugs, weapons, even people buried deep inside freight.
With our system scanning a vehicle, we'll find those trucks without having to rip apart the car.
The radar flashlight detects movement through walls. SWAT teams, warrant-serving deputies can sense danger impossible to see.
It detects the very slight motion associated with the breathing cycle, the very slight movement of the chest.
Perhaps most controversial, the airport body scanner used by the U.S. Customs Service. Low-level radiation considered safe because it penetrates clothing, not skin. About 1 in every 9,000 international airline passengers asked to submit.
We do not use this technology randomly.
The Customs Service says it employs strict guidelines, including written consent from the suspect before search. A supervisor must approve the scan. The machine operator is of the same sex, and no one else is in the room. And only images that reveal contraband are kept. All others discarded. Safeguards designed to keep the balance between technology and privacy. Jim Avila, NBC News, Chicago.
Still ahead tonight, it's the oldest urban legend going, gators in New York City. But this one's no myth, how they're trying to wrangle an alligator in Central Park.
Good evening, this is Dan Lothian in Los Angeles. Hollywood has lost one of its great actors. Carroll O'Connor died of a heart attack this afternoon. His publicist says the actor collapsed at his Culver City home and was rushed to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead. O'Connor was best known for his role as Archie Bunker in the long-running TV series All in the Family and its sequel, Archie's Place. He had a long list of credits on television and in the movies. O'Connor was 76. Now back to Tom Brokaw.
Unveiled today with a great deal of fanfare and a bit of skepticism. The biggest jumbo jet ever, which brings us to the nightly news question. How many passengers can the largest jet now in service carry? The answer, 524 on the Boeing 747-400. But the plane Boeing's competitor Airbus is showing off tonight makes even the 747 look modest. Here's NBC's Robert Hager.
At this year's Showcase Paris Air Show, two astoundingly different concepts of the future. The European manufacturer Airbus gambles on big. Its A380, revolutionary double-deck, 62 sold already, delivery in 5 years. American rival Boeing bets on fast. Its Sonic Cruiser, equally revolutionary, small winglets in front, big triangular wings behind, to fly almost the speed of sound, on the drawing board. Analyst Michael Boyd.
The big prize is whether you're going to be in business 20 years from now.
Airbus has the early jump in marketing, slick videos with models, how its size, 1.5 times a 747, would permit fancy bars, spacious seating and aisles, even showers.
Some of our airline customers have expressed interest in things like casinos below deck, sleeping berths below deck, even a fast food franchise.
Or would lines make it a cattle car, cram in 800 or more seats?
When 747s first came out, they put lounges on them. When you get on a 747 today, the last word that comes to mind is lounge. When these airplanes come along, they're going to need to pack them full of people. So I think that the chances of being able to play basketball and getting a massage on that airplane is about zero.
Boeing's plane costs extra money in fuel to fly so fast, so would be aimed mostly at business travelers willing to pay more to get there sooner.
On Trans-Pacific routes, passengers will save as much as 3 hours.
Shave an hour off flights across the U.S., an hour and a half off flights to London. Two giants of commercial aviation duke it out.
At stake, an airplane market worth $1 trillion a year one day. And whether we fly planes that are bigger or faster in the 21st century. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
In a suburb outside of New York City today, the haunting and moving images of a massive funeral for 2 firefighters killed in the line of duty. More than 10,000 fellow firefighters came to honor the fallen heroes, Harry Ford and Brian Fahey, 2 of the 3 who died fighting a fire on Father's Day. They and their colleague, John Downing, who will be buried tomorrow, left a total of 8 children. If you live in New York long enough, you'll see just about anything. But this spring, New Yorkers thought they were seeing an alligator in Central Park. Nah, couldn't be. Could it? Yes, it could. NBC's Pat Dawson on the Great Gator Raid.
New York City's pastoral Central Park, usually a refuge from the city's wilder side, but today the search was on for something truly wild. You could see it in the eyes, an alligator that somehow got into a lake in the park and was captured, at least on video, by a local TV station last night. Confirming what dozens of New Yorkers thought they'd seen in recent days. City officials wondered if the urban gator was real.
We felt it was more valid than a UFO, but we still weren't certain until last night.
A New York park ranger, perhaps not used to dealing with reptilian wildlife, tried, but failed to catch it last night. At just 2 feet long, it's hardly Godzilla terrorizing the Big Apple. Hardly as fearsome as the gator's Mike Bailey and his friends are used to wrestling with for tourists in Florida. But New York decided if anybody could catch its little lizard, Bailey could. So he was brought here.
I'm going to try to get close enough to just reach down there and catch him with my hand.
If there's an alligator there, he will find it, he will catch it, guaranteed.
Even though one of New York's favorite urban myths is colonies of alligators living in its sewers, that remains a largely unconfirmed legend. Still, strange as it seems, this is not the first time real alligator sightings have made headlines in New York. There was one that startled passengers in a subway station. Alligators in a river, reports of swarms of them. Even one actually found in a sewer. And tonight after dark, gator hunter Bailey will be hunting for the city's most recent reptile on the loose, so the urban jungle can get back to a more familiar kind of wildlife. Pat Dawson, NBC News, New York.
That's nightly news for this Thursday night. I'm Tom Brokaw. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
You're watching KSBW Channel 8.